Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this council meeting. Apologies for the delay. We've had some technical issues with the live stream aspect of things. There may be some echoing with the sound, and that'll need to be looked at during our morning tea break. So we'll get things underway. So welcome to everyone in the council chamber, to members of the public, to councillors and staff, and welcome to media. And to those who are watching online. So we've got a fairly solid agenda today. There's going to be one or two items taken out of order. So just to run through that, we'll have a public forum. We'll go to my report. We will then have the notice of motion from Councillor Hopkins, and then go back to the order from there, which is recommendations from other committees, and carrying on down through. Minutes will be the last agenda item in public. And then we'll go to public excluded for several items in there. So first of all, do we have any apologies? We do. I'll just acknowledge Councillor McCone and Councillor Thompson joining us online. Are there any other any apologies? Okay, we'll move on. Any declarations of interest? Okay, so public forum first up. Ray Henderson, welcome back, Ray. And again, apologies for the delay, whichever one you want to take. You know the drill.
Okay.
Let's go.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Steve. I've got a couple of items, could be three. Doesn't like me. Do you want to go to that one? Oh, that was nice. Get that fixed. Okay, right. For those that missed it, I'll do it. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. I've got a couple of items, could be three, but I'll start with the main one so I don't exhaust my allotted time. So, Beach Road. I went for a walk in the weekend and was surprised and not unexpectedly very disappointed. Most of the closed section is perfectly good drivable road, showing no sign of crumbling into the sea. In its current state, closing off the section from just north of the large hole to just south of the small hole would have been sufficient. I have some, well actually many questions, which may eventually form an official information request, but I decided to start at this public forum level in case our viewing public could shed some light on these matters. Please contact me. When viewing online photos, I had assumed that the green gunk was spray-on grass seed to help make the clay buns look pretty. But no, it is just green gunk. Is there an MSDS available to the public for information? I'm sure you know what an MSDS is. Right, if the road was realigned, straightened in, was it 1975 or 1990 or whenever it was done? What was the date somewhere that it was straightened? If that was done, then why couldn't it be reset back and then the remediation of the rubbish residue carried out? So if that road's gone over the rubbish, put it back to there and access the rubbish. Don't disturb the road. If the road was realigned, straightened in whenever, then was due diligence carried out? For example, taking core samples to gauge stability for road reconstruction, compacting the rubbish if necessary, capping to seal and create a stable base, and so on. But that's the past. Now fast forward to the present. Recently, there has been some rock armouring placed on the beach below both sides. I've been informed that there was a significant backfill of soil on the west side of these rocks to cover, and maybe to cap, the rubbish. If this is the case, then wouldn't a lot of the excavated material transported to Palmerston have been clean soil fill, not rubbish at all? I've had a Kakanui resident contact me who has concerns about processes surrounding the beach road work. So this is his words, so don't shoot the messenger. I see Roonies are fixing up Armour Road to put a better base down to take the increased traffic that used to go down Beach Road. That, combined with the fact that if there are records at council about Beach Road being realigned over the dump, then this means that Beach Road was never going to be reopened, and council knew that before they started work on the old dump. Putting in a submission on it is going to go nowhere as their mind is made up. And a little bit further, I think the council have made a real mess of fixing Beach Road and cost us a lot of money. They have just spent money resurfacing that part of Beach Road. Then just after that, they fixed the bank, but it slipped into the sea at great cost. Then they widened 1,000 Acre Road so you could turn into Gardeners Road to go the Beach Road way to Oamaru. This was a waste of money. The dump should have been done first, then the rest would not have needed to be done. Then they said they needed to close Beach Road to clean up the old dump. I went to the council meeting at the Kakanui school last Thursday and put this to them and said I had a friend that used to bike out to Kakanui down Beach Road 60 years ago, and he said the dump was beside the road. So how could the dump be under it? They said that the road had been realigned. So that means that they knew the dump was under the road, and that would have been on the records. And that means they knew before the road was closed, so it was never going to reopen, and it needs to be. It is one of Oamaru's attractions, a road to the beaches that had the wow factor, but they want to make it into a bike track for about 5% of Oamaru people. But as a road, it is there for everybody, including cyclists. Fix it. So end of his lesson. So he's not happy. So while we're talking alternative use, it is obviously being used as a walking track, certainly judging by the cans, bottles, food wrappers, and dog poo. What I cannot grasp is why the barriers at each end wrap over the road edge contours, making it very difficult for both walkers and cyclists. Okay, I have a change of tack now. What was the classification of Beach Road in the previous district plan? And is it unchanged in the new draft plan? Is it a significant natural area, a site or area of significance to Maori, a scenic asset? Some time ago, there was a comprehensive categorising of roads in the district, primary, secondary, feeder, etc. Beach Road should continue to serve as an alternative route in the event of an emergency on State Highway 1. And my final note, there are historic sites on the road. Council has a duty of care to ensure their preservation. Have local iwi been consulted on the possibility and the effects of permanent closure, especially considering that if unchecked, then these sites would be lost to the sea surges? I have more, but I'll stop there. I'll have to leave my other stuff for my LTP submission. Thank you for your attentiveness.
Thank you, Ray. I'd just say that the comments you've quoted from someone else are quite contradictory, saying, why did this other stuff happen before the work was done on Project Reclaim? If there was predetermination that there wasn't going to be reopened, then why did we do it? Yeah, that's a reality of it. I mean, we haven't determined that the road will be closed. We are looking for people to make submissions on that, and we will welcome those submissions because we do need to get an indication from the public, you know, how much do they support the reopening of the road. And, you know, as I've said, I've got my own personal preferences around what I want, but we need to get the public comment and feedback so that we can understand, because it's not a cheap exercise. And yeah, if the rubbish was under the road, and yeah, that's again, why would we dig up a perfectly good road when we didn't need to? So I mean, there's some common sense in there. I just ask that people do take a common sense approach to it, and we have to make some hard decisions in the future on that one. Councillors, do you have any questions for Ray? No. We'll look forward to your submission, and no doubt you'll be back speaking to that. Thanks very much. All right, next we've got Lisa Howard-Sullivan. So Lisa, welcome back to the chamber as well.
I've got a couple of quotes, so if I've misquoted them or misread them, I apologise at the start. But before I start on this, I'm actually going to give you some positive feedback, which I think you don't think I do very often. But one of the things I'm talking about today is transparency. And I think one of your biggest problems is the lack of transparency on the good things you're doing. So transparency, you know, we say you're not being transparent, but you're not actually giving out the good things. Now, I've heard some really good things about some of the processes that have been done through the transformation. And it seems to me that it's just a shame that you're not actually giving out that information, because while it's actually not really in the public's interest, it's actually as a value to see what's happening. Now, I'm actually going to talk about the water service section of the long-term plan consultation document. And we know that there's 5 options and you've put down the 2 that you're looking at. or two that's in there, which is the Water Service Company, the CCO, and the status quo. But of course, you're also looking at the multi-council CCO. And it's not, I've written it, but I'm going offline. It's not really clear exactly how that works. And I know from my reading that it's not clear to anybody how it works, because there's still a bill being looked at. And it is confusing, but it's not really mentioned in that long-term plan, except when it says we expect that there'll be a CCO and maybe there'll be a joint CCO at some stage. Now, one of the things I read, and I think it was from yours, Mr. Parmley, is that you don't have to consult again if the public have been consulted on it and they understand it. And it is complicated. I mean, I've been reading it. My husband loves it because he gets to watch the car programs while I'm reading this. It is complicated. It is hard to put it across to people, but I don't think it's in there enough. And I would like to suggest, I'm going to suggest it that it could have been in there. It needs to be explained more, because it is an option. I know they said you had to choose more than one option, and it is a possibility like the others, but it's not actually explained very well. And it's not, even the in-house one isn't explained very well about the ring fencing. So people just think it is status quo, when in actual fact, we know it's going to be ring fenced. And perhaps, and again, we're unsure, perhaps it's going to have a board sitting over it. We know that it's actually going to be sitting beside itself, and we don't know the exact thing. But those things, if people understand a little bit better, it gives them more opportunity to give you more positive feedback as opposed to always negative feedback. I think that transparency is really important, so that people can really start understanding what you're doing. When there's a vacuum, we fill it. That's what we do. So what I'm saying is, there are some good things that you're doing. People talk to me and I hear those good things, but it's that vacuum of information. And I really think we need to work more together on getting that out. So in my written word here, I've said, maybe you could put an addendum now. I don't know. But what concerns me is, if you do decide to go down that multi-council CCO, are you going to have to go back out to the public? And that's a further cost, and that's going to be further delay. So that's one of the things I actually wanted to talk about today.
Thank you.
I hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is more than just the decision today around, and there will be more engagement. I'll get Mr. Parmley to comment in detail. And yeah, I just want to really reiterate that today's decision is a decision to investigate the option, not to enter into the agreement. So yeah, that's something that gets missed by some people.
I understand that.
Yep.
I do understand that, but in the long-term plan, it doesn't actually, that's not explained. I know you can't explain everything, but the actual, in that report, I think it's the Morrison Law Report, it actually has the three sitting beside it. Something like that, so people could understand and look at it, because wording is hard, visuals we know is better, but we don't have that information in there. So they're only looking at status quo and council and CCO. The other one isn't in here. And I'm worried that you're going to have to come back to us at a later stage.
We will.
Yeah, and I think in response to that, if it's not clear to you, it's because it's not clear to us either. And to give an example of that, so the Parliament passed some initial legislation that set out a broad direction in terms of the government's local water done well programme, but the further legislation is just going through Parliament at the moment and is subject to change. The initial legislation said we need to consult on two options. The current bill that's going through is talking about us needing to consult on three options, and there's all sorts of potential changes within there. And we're up against a deadline that the government has set us, under threat of intervention in any council that doesn't meet that deadline, to actually deliver a local water delivery plan. And at the point when council met in December to consider what it was going to consult on, there wasn't actually a joint CCO option available, and there still isn't. We're investigating it. We did some work with the Otago Southland councils. Some of those councils have said no, they're not interested in going down that route. So we've started some work with a smaller group of councils, and the item on the agenda today is really to commit to a partnership to look seriously at that option. And if we get to a point where we're all agreed that there's an option that can work, we will need to go out and consult the community again on that. And legislation may force us to do that if it remains as 3 options.
Could I suggest that when you do that, because it is really confusing. I totally understand metering. I've lived in places where they're metering. People don't understand that. That's I don't understand why, but it's to me, it's easy. But if you do have to go back, could we look at how we simplify that? Because this is our biggest cost. This is our biggest, the infrastructure and the water is the big one. That's the issue I personally think is what this is mainly about, because once we get that right, then the other monies start to come right. I haven't made up my mind by the yet. I'm still reading and tossing it up. But people are frightened and they read into what they want to read. So when we've talked in the past, and I'm talking for myself today, I'm not talking for any other group, but when we talk about transparency, it's not just a hit over the knuckles, it's we need to know. We need to know, because this is our community. Some of us don't pay any attention, but for a lot of us we do, and they will when it comes to the bottom dollar.
Mm.
That's when it hits us all. So if we have to come back, could we look at just 3 the options in a more simplified, more clear way?
Yeah, well, when we're at that stage, we'll be able to define them.
Right.
I think the simplest way to explain metering is use the electricity industry. In residential properties, it doesn't matter, what your household is, you pay the same for water. Would people want that with electricity? Because that's the same thing. You would use more electricity if you didn't pay anything extra for, regardless of how much you used. And so, water's the same. We need to actually conserve water and use it more wisely. And if it's metered and you're paying, over
I
a certain
totally
amount.
Understand the metering, and I think.
So that's anyway. That's trying to explain it.
But people, it needs to be explained a little bit more about.
I'd just add to that. I mean, this council decided to consult on that because we think it will help in terms of lowering the amount we need to invest in water over the next few years. But again, we're not clear on what will happen because the legislation currently going through Parliament says that whoever's providing water will need to move to a different basis of charging. They won't be able to do it on the value of the property. So
I have lived in places where it's watered, and the thing that stands out to me most is when you meter, you pay for what you use and you find the leaks. Now, once you find those leaks, you can address that and you can reduce the amount of water you use, which totally helps on the infrastructure. And when you have to pay for the 6 kids in the shower, you make sure they get in and out because you've got to pay for it. But if you're paying the same as the 6 kids, it's inequitable. So I'm totally for metering.
We'll go to the councillor who leaves the lights on when he leaves the room. Jim. Well, put your microphone on. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Yes, look, I do get it. Metering measures actual use and therefore encourages people to manage that use more conscientiously and carefully. But I would like to ask a question about the matter you made, the point you made at the start. You were being positive, and you said there were a lot of positive things about transformation that aren't being communicated, in your view. So what are they, in your view?
Okay, well, I work locally and walk and talk to lots of people, and one of the things that have come out, and then they're not going to be things that interest necessarily the public, but what they do is enhance what you're doing in-house. One of somebody and somebody who's no longer working here for whatever reason, actually told me about the accounts payment system and how that had improved immensely, how it had cut down work and how better it was. The other one was in HR, and how as a manager in HR, they found that the leave system and application and things like that was so much better. It was actually enabled them to manage their staff leave and who they had on the ground at various times. And I found that really positive. Having been an admin and worked in admin a lot, I found that that was really positive. It's not necessarily what your ratepayers want to hear because they don't see the saving. They don't see how it fits in. But I found that a really positive thing. And I think that you should be shouting out what you're achieving and telling us because, as I've said before, we fill a vacuum. And so, I mean, I congratulate you on that. It's well done. And those people were very happy. I mean, that's the thing I got from them was that they were really happy with those processes. So you need to be getting that message out that it's not all doom and gloom, that people, you know, it isn't. There are good things that are happening, but you need to tell us as well.
Thank you.
So I'm going to congratulate you on that.
Thank you very much for the bouquet. We do get a bit fixated on the brickbats and trying
And
to
so
deal
do
with
we.
them. So thank you for that, and thanks for the feedback.
Thank you.
Right, next we've got Kevin Malcolm representing the Event Centre Trust and Adair Craik. So welcome.
Morning, Worship, councillors, staff, and everyone else that's here. We were prepared for 9:10, so my power rate's run out, so we'll have to shorten this down. Look, really interesting listening to our last speaker, and one of the great bouquets that council should be giving is its investment into the Network Waitaki Event Centre. A superb construction that will just enlighten the whole Waitaki district. That's firmly my belief and firmly the belief of the many people that I talk to. So Adair is on the trust with me, and we thought we'd just come along today to bring you some further good news on the event centre. We've just passed on our fundraising total. We have a build cost at this stage of $32,850,000. That's a completed to complete stage one, of which we have a build price of $26 million, a contingency fund of $2.6 million, and then additional funds to make up the $32,850 to ensure that we are not shortchanging ourselves and ensuring that the project is a superb article. So we're at $29 million raised now. So we're excited about that, and we thought it was very appropriate that we come to council now and let you know that we're well down the track. We're confident that so that gives us, based on those figures, another $3.7 million to raise. And again, we're certainly confident that by May 2025, the bulk of that amount will be raised, and our team will be racing towards that we're sure that we have enough funding to begin and complete stage two. So in fact, we deliver to the community the full package that it deserves. That will be the 6-court centre and the grandstand that we will replace the mighty one that we demolished. We're currently working with several philanthropic trusts and with major corporations and businesses. We're getting a very positive response, and we're we're very confident of getting those funds. In our March edition of the Omru Mail, hopefully you're all good solid readers of our local paper. In March, you'll see the announcement of a further funder that has jumped on board and be a major amount. We have to hold that back to March. They want to make a special announcement, and they want to bring it forward to they're really supporting the community and right on board with this project. So that's really exciting. I can't share that until then, but that's another big chunk towards our funding. We've got multiple companies and local businesses that we're working with at the moment. Plus, we also have additional families that have indicated in the early stages that they want to support the project, but they wanted the trust to come back once progress was started, once they could see something. And if you pop down there, and I think it's about 3 weeks, you'll see the portal structure actually going up. And so those people are excited and are ringing me now to say, come back and let's get some numbers on paper. So we're exceptionally excited about that. And we're working at the moment to finalise our funding, our communication promotional activities for 25-26, and they're well underway. We're just a few details to finalise, but we're looking at a black tie cabaret with celebrity guests to drag the money out of those people that have money in the area. Again, that we're really excited by that. But again, to involve the community, we're looking at a telethon style event, and that will certainly be down. It looks as though that's going to be down in the precinct. Again, because this is in formative stages, we haven't been to council, and we'll get all the right permissions. We won't just run down there and hold an event. And that will involve the whole community with sporting activities and various challenges that, we probably even have a council against the rest tug of war competition. So there'll be opportunities for everyone to get involved and ensure they can be part of it. So really just today is to relay that we've cranked over $29 million. We think that's excited. We've had a huge contribution from the council, and that was a really bold commitment, but we're getting there. There's action happening, and we've already had, and again, I can't announce it yet, but we have an event already been booked in for August 2026. So we're excited.
Very good. Thank you very much. Adia, do you have anything to add? No? Okay. Any questions? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, look, well done. I'm just trying to get a handle on this. If we've raised 29 million, that's 50. That includes the 15 million from the council. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
So that means you guys have raised $14 million.
Yep.
That would include Doug Hurst's.
Yes, it does.
5.
Yep. Remember that if I could just on Doug, the condition that Doug supplied the money, for Doug and Donna, it's a joint effort, and we better make sure that's said. That $5 million was conditional upon the trust securing the equivalent amount of money from locals.
Right.
So we've exceeded that, and
okay, excellent. No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So the trust at the moment has managed to raise roughly 9 million. Excellent. Are there any really big donations in there that multi-million
It's the naming rights sponsor.
Probably look, Network Waitaki.
Yes.
Of course, it is called the Network Waitaki Event Centre. But there is the project board is aware of the individual donations, but there are many of our donors who at this stage wish to remain and not have anonymity around that. But you will see, if you read our paper, so there's the Omri Vet Centre, there's LJ Hookers, those are the ones we currently have, but there's a list of those that we advertise through their gym. But there's specific amounts are between the trust, commercially sensitive, or they've asked for anonymity around those amounts. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you both for coming in and giving us an update. All the best for the remainder of the fundraising. And if I could just take the opportunity to publicly acknowledge and congratulate Adia Craik on being awarded a fellowship of the Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand Association. So well done in recognition of all your community work that you do. Obviously, this pays part of that, but we know you do a heap of a lot in the community. So congratulations, Adia. Okay, that brings us to the end of the public forum. We are quite a bit behind time due to delays along the way. So we will move now though to my Mayor's report. I will take it as read in the interest of brevity. I'll just add to go to it. Just a couple of things. So just on the ministerial changes, last week I travelled for 7 hours to Queenstown and back to meet with Minister Watts for 45 minutes. It's not always a good use of time, but I think it was quite a very useful meeting, that one. I joined the other 3 mayors of the councils that are working together on the water CCO, and we talked to the minister about that and gave them an update on progress there. We talked about regional deals. That was something he raised with us as to what work were we doing in the background on a regional deal. And we also took up the opportunity to talk about the expense of audit and the mandate to go far beyond the financials and get into a whole lot of things like the consultation document wording and so forth. Something we know costs our ratepayers hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, and something which it just adds a lot of cost, a lot of use of resource, and doesn't actually add a lot of value to our community. So that was a good discussion. The other thing I'll just quickly add is just an update to the health shuttle discussion, just to say that we had an online meeting with some representatives from St John yesterday afternoon, and it was quite positive. So they don't want to be saying too much because they don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but can say we are making progress there. So we'll keep working with them and hopefully have some good news sooner rather than later. Happy to take any questions. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I had one, also a comment. I like some of the proposals for the next elections and the in-person polling booths. I genuinely think that parallel tracking the way people can vote with the local body elections and central government elections will actually prove positive. At least I hope it will. But I'm just looking at page 98 of our agenda. You make the point about, again, of this need to state a preferred option. And, you know, you say here stating preferred option when we did not actually agree on one was not only distracting, but it made us appear to have predetermined the result. Oddly enough, the minutes that we're going to confirm later, one of those meeting minutes indicates that not even officers signalled a preferred option. Mr. Rendell, speaking to us, said if he was looking at the matter exclusively on the basis of cost, he might prefer to close the road. But if he was looking at the issue in terms of amenity and the public perception of the value of the road, he might advocate for it remaining open. And what my question is, and it's a question to Mr. Palmley really, but perhaps to you as well, I've been going through the Local Government Act. I can see nothing in there that entitles audit to insist on preferred options. All I can see is that audit have to make a report on the consultation document. And even that seems to me to be something that could arguably stand outside the document itself. In other words, their report could be, this is a very good document, we like it. Or the report could be, this is not a very good document, we think it should say this, this, and this. Full stop. I can see nothing in the Act that entitles audit to actually extend the overarching and, in my view, meddlesome and arbitrarily dictatorial or arbitrarily directive, that's a better word, directive approach that it is taking to local government relative to the approach it takes to central. So my question is, can officers please have a look at this? I would genuinely like to see the statutory basis on which audit is asserting its entitlement to do these things, because I can't find it in the Act.
I think Mr. Hope might be able to answer.
The issue goes to basically auditing standards that are set basically by the International Accounting Body. And so once the word audit is used, the Office of the Auditor General is required to follow those standards. And so they are quite prescriptive and quite detailed because this is essentially treated like a prospectus from a company. So there are standards that need to be met in the audit process, and that is the basis for, that's the justification for the approach they take.
I do not believe that those standards would preempt or take precedence over parliamentary statute. And parliamentary statute does not say they can dictate the content. It does not say that we have to include preferred options at their behest. All it says is that they produce a report on the document. And it doesn't even say that they can interfere with the content of the document, rather than just a report on it.
We understand your view on this, Councillor Hopkins, but it's not the time for a debate on it. Standards will be the standards, and Mr. Hope, I think, has reasonably answered the situation, as much as we don't like the answer. But he's not able to change the rules around that. It is something that we definitely should again raise with the minister. Okay, so any other question? Deputy Mayor Halalele?
No, thank you. Through the chair, I just want to respond to Councillor Hopkins. We actually all agreed as a council to approve the consultation document that went out. So with you coming out and saying that there's no requirement to do that in the legislation, I think it kind of contradicts, like some of our decision-making process. So I do want to put that on the table. Also, I just wanted to acknowledge the hard work that the staff have kind of put in to this document. So I think we just do need to be mindful in terms of how we frame and approach the comments that we make around here. We actually agreed as a council to put that through. So those are just some of the requirements that our staff have had to take into account in terms of the information that's put out there.
Well, since we are having a debate, I did move earlier this year a resolution inviting us to actually remove the preferred option description regarding Beach Road from the consultation document.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that was lost, but it has been an issue. And at one of the Zoom meetings, every one of us said that it wasn't our preferred option. It was only in the document because we've been told it had to be.
Thank you for those views. Any other questions? Okay, so move we receive my report. Councillor Cowles, thank you very much. Councillor Linwood, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, that's carried. Right, we're going to head to item 7.1 now on page 117. So the notice of motion on the Sports and Events Centre. I just note that we've got in the chamber Robin Jamieson, who's on the committee for North Otago Tennis, and also note importantly that this wasn't initiated by North Otago Tennis, but rather by Councillor Hopkins. So Councillor Hopkins, this is yours, so I'll hand over to you to comment on this to start with.
Right, basically, I've somehow ended up on the performance audit and the risk that the agenda. I need to try and find my way back to council meeting. Well,
can you put your microphone on just so people can understand?
Yes, I've just explained that I'm need to take a month. What did you say, page? 117. Yeah, oddly enough, I end up on par. Oh, okay.
Can we get the millennial onto it? Thanks, Councillor Cowles.
Yeah. It was fine a moment ago. But anyway, yeah, thanks, Guy. Look, I hope you've all read it. And I do thank Guy and Tim and Councillor Thompson, Jim, for actually doing what is required now, which is to say endorsing the notice of motion. There is one quite important typo that I would actually draw to members' attention. It's my own fault. But under the recommendations, number 4, the word rewarding should actually be regarding. The recommendation should read, also considers further new information regarding the possible adverse effect on overall sports and events centre usage arising from the 2024 court service decision. Now, all I would say to members is, when you vote on this today, please accept that I have very carefully invited you to do nothing more than agree to have another look at it. I'm not saying today that we make a decision to change our minds. I am saying that I believe there's a whole lot of new information that some of us were given at a meeting with the tennis club in January, and evidence that the information that we did have last year wasn't complete, or may have understated the engagement of people with tennis, and certainly also may have overstated the essential nature of a sprung floor surface, because I've included a whole lot of appendices here showing a range of facilities. The first one is the Southland Stadium with a synthetic surface. Then we have the High Performance Centre in Christchurch. We have the Winton Netball Club, an indoor facility with a synthetic surface. The Washtenae Community Centre, synthetic surface, and Minogue Park in netball courts in Hamilton, where the netball people there are hailing their facility, the synthetic surface, saying it means we have a modern facility to support grassroots netball in the greater Hamilton area. We are very appreciative of the support from Trust Waikato to assist us to improve this long-term community asset. And in Queenstown, netball and tennis players rejoice as QEC outdoor court resurface begins. The surface will be Rebound Ace, a dedicated sports surface that is a huge upgrade from the current concrete. And of course, the Wanaka Recreation Centre, where the surface is described as therapeutically cushioned option to hard floors and surfaces. Now, at the time that we voted on the matter to switch from two synthetic surfaces and 4 sprung courts, we were told there was only going to be a $50,000 cost. Well, since then, we were advised last year that that's not the case. And I was at one of the project board meetings where it was made clear that there would need to be an additional $69,400 for further blocking to further strengthen sprung timber floor courts in order for events to take place there. So the cost has suddenly bumped up to $119,050 plus 69.
So can I just do a correction on that, because that extra money was for all of the courts, so 4 of them would need it anyway. So at least 2/3 was a cost that was going to be needed to be spent.
The additional blocking was the further strength
for the 6 courts. So 4 of them need it because we want to make sure that it is suitable for those other events, that it wasn't sprung only, that it did have the blocking and that allowed some heavier stuff onto those courts. So just to clarify that at this point.
Okay, well, the way it was explained at the project board, the view I formed was that was strengthening that was specifically needed for the 2 additional courts that were now going to be sprung wooden floors. But my key concern is that, well, I believe the cost associated with the decision we took last year is greater than we were told at the time. And the presentation from the tennis club in January indicated a very substantial potential investment that we may be asked to contribute to when they come to us with a submission as part of their long-term plan. Now, my anxiety is either that we feel obliged to contribute to the funding for that project as well as the Sports and Events Centre, or that we disappoint the tennis club twice and say, no, we're not going to provide funds for this proposal that you're bringing to us. My I've detailed in my notice of motion the number of people who could potentially be using the Sports and Events Centre synthetic courts. The fact that we were radically under, the number of children coaching was understated. We were told it'd be a maximum of 4, when apparently coaches can have up to 24 children learning tennis at the time. There's a much greater involvement with Pacifica and the Oamaru Tongan Tennis Club than we were led to believe at the time. All of these matters indicate to me that if we want to maximise the community engagement with the centre, if we want to make it available to the greatest number of clubs and sporting codes possible, if we want to actually have surfaces that are clearly of absolutely acceptable to netball and basketball and those codes in a variety of other very expensive facilities elsewhere, then we should actually at least revisit the matter. I mean, the Mayor's raised matters of cost that may challenge my thought that the $69,400 was exclusively related to the 2-court switch. But there are still costs embedded in the decision that I don't think have been flushed out. So in order to have maximum engagement with the majority of the greatest number of codes involved, to give tennis an all-round and all-weather, all-season, all-year facility, where they only have a five-month facility now as against 12 months in other parts of the country, I'm just asking that we revisit the matter using the criteria in the recommendations as the basis for us actually arriving at a conclusion. I challenge the officer's report because it only says it's a $50,000 cost, and that doesn't include the strengthening that I've mentioned, which needs to be included in my view. So as I say, all I'm asking today is that when we vote on this, we do indeed resolve to reconsider, that's all, reconsider the 24 decision to switch from a 2 synthetic surface 4-sprung timber court configuration for the proposed Network Waitaki Sports and Events Centre, and in undertaking this reconsideration, that we consider new information provided since Council's previous decision regarding actual and potential cost increases and their implications for the project and ratepayers more generally, and also considers further new information regarding the possible adverse effect on overall sports and events centre usage arising from the 2024 court surface decision, and that it should do so in a timely manner so as not to disrupt the building program. And I just think it is prudent and wise, particularly in light of the fact that we are about to have a local long-term plan submission asking us to consider a very significant potential contribution to a second development arising inevitably and as a consequence of this decision. I really think we need to rethink it and rethink it quickly.
Thank you. It wasn't a case of that my comments may challenge your assertion around cost, that they destroyed your assertion around cost. It's at best $20,000 to $23,000 for the 2 courts that we're talking about. So we'll just clear that one. Anyway, as far as the process goes, we've got a recommendation around whether we receive the notice of motion. So I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder for that to get us through this next step. To move to Councillor Hopkins, seconded to Councillor Blacklow. I'll put that, or does anyone want to speak to that? Start with.
Just so what is being proposed here is whether you accept the notice of motion to be able to discuss it, and not accepting the recommendations in there that have been put forward by Councillor Hopkins at this stage. It's just whether to accept it so you can debate it further.
Okay, so I'll put that. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? Oh, great. I can't see our online ones. Can you, Councillor Thompson, can you indicate how you're voting?
I'm voting against.
Thank you. And Councillor McCone?
Voting against.
Okay, so that's 6 votes against, so it's not carried. I will comment, Councillor Hopkins, that some of the comments you made aren't correct, and I don't, putting them in the public realm isn't helpful. Tennis's best project or plan A really is the Chalmers Street Court, so we'll allow them to do much more than the event centre will. The event centre would be a very nice extra to have, but it's looking at what is best for tennis, and they support having a space in the event centre, but equally that having 6 courts outside sealed and under a cover would be good. The other aspects that haven't taken into account is their desire to get age group tournaments in particular. They require courts that are the same surface, and while you've quoted some other ones like Christchurch, they are rubberising all of their courts, so they'll have the same surface. We will have 4 sprung floors and 2 rubberised surfaces, and that's not going to be the same surface, so they'll challenge us getting tournaments. So there are a number of other aspects which come into this. I think we all reluctantly made the decision last time to go to 6 sprung because we did feel that we were backed into a corner, and we appreciate your motivation behind this notice motion, but obviously it hasn't been accepted today, and we can discuss it further separately if you wish to. But for now, we move on to the next topic. So thank you very much. Next topic, what page we're going to. So going back to item 6.1, recommendation from the Waihemo Community Board on page 106. And who's going to speak to that? Is there one of the directors want to speak to that?
Hopkins is not trying to the page. Jack Hopkins is wondering if in fact
page 106.
If in fact, can I just a point of order? Can you just identify which 6 councillors voted not to receive the notice of motion?
If you want a division,
yes, please. I think I do.
You should have called that before we moved on to the next topic. There were 6. I think there may have been 1 abstention, but I'm going.
Oh, sorry, who was the abstention?
No, there were 6 voted against. So there's 4 in the room, 2 online.
And you're not prepared to say who you were?
You didn't ask for a division at the time, and we're on the next topic, Councillor. I'm trying to get this through this agenda as efficiently as we can, because we are on time constraints, as you know. I gave you every opportunity to explain your notice of motion before. Mr. Cook, are you going to be speaking to this? Okay. Right. Well, in the absence of anyone speaking to it, I do have a question. And the recommendation has under number 2, the retirement plan is a 3-stage retirement. That's not part of the community board's the recommendation to the community board. Was that something that the community board did mention? Because I thought we were talking about a 2-staged retirement or the reserve.
Mayor, yeah, no, it certainly was discussed at the meeting, and as you can see in one of the attachments to the report, it shows 3 different shading shades, three different coloured areas, and that aligns with the idea of the three-stage retirement plan. And that was the recommendation of the report prepared by the biodiversity advisor.
So which page is that plan on that map?
114. So there's a large blue area, a smaller green area, and then a yellow area.
Okay, I just saw that as being a yellow and a bluish fading into yellow area.
Mayor Kirchner,
So
can
what-
I help?
Yeah, Councillor Thompson, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. The initial proposal, or the dark blue actually covers where the initial proposal was. Then in discussion with the Puketapu Trust, they wanted to increase that slightly to allow them better access to the planting and revegetation. So the red line is the proposed line of the new fence that will remove all stock from what will be the top of the block. Then the suggestion was that once that had been shown, had been revegetated, then we could move on. But again, it left a very large area. So the suggestion was to split the next areas into two. One, that it allows the trust to propagate and replant over a strategic time. And two, it allows the current leasee, who is a third generation leasee, time to alter their business as they strategically withdraw from the whole of the reserve.
Okay, so you are saying it was a three-stage approach, just not possibly those lines?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you for that clarification. Right, any questions, Councillor Percival?
I just want to ask, you have mentioned several times in the article about the damage that deer are doing to the natural vegetation, but the recommendation just allows for blanket grazing, and I appreciate the fact that you've got a withdrawal plan, but is that in respect of the grazier's preference to take deer and not put sheep or some other species in there?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that 3 generations ago it was a sheep farm. Now it is a full-on deer farming operation. So as you can see by the map, the major remnants of the native is in that top original blue portion. So it was the feeling of the community board that the strategic withdrawal, whilst not the optimum, is probably the most practical solution.
Would it not be worth putting into the grazing licence the fact that the farmer would only put in weaners, yearlings or young animals?
Again, I reiterate, the problem is to try and be strategic to both parties. Legally, because it's a reserve, we could just go bang, take the whole lot back, but then we're going to encounter the costs of pest and weed control, and this is a major pest area, particularly in terms of possums. So, and the landowner has been more than doing his share in that department. So again, the community board felt this was the most equitable route to go down.
Thank you. Are you happy to move the recommendation from the community board, councillor Thompson?
I certainly am.
And do we have a seconder? Councillor Percival, thank you. Any discussion on this? I'll just make the comment, this is achieving, one of the community's aspirations down there, and, it's certainly a very positive project and an opportunity to rejuvenate some of the biodiversity in that area. So it's, very supportive of that. If there's no other comments, so I'll put it, those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. And now moving on to recommendations from the Performance Audit and Risk Committee, which is on page 115. And Mr. Hope, would you like to speak to this one?
Yes, matters on page 115. These were some minor adjustments to both policies that were agreed to by the committee. Sort of so minor in nature that didn't seem necessary to include another 2 blocks of documents in the agenda. And as you can see, they were generally met with approval by the committee.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay, we'll do these separately because there wasn't necessarily unanimous agreement on them. So we've got the first one that the council adopts the revised risk management policy. Someone like to move? Deputy Mayor Haley. Thank you. We have a seconder for that. Councillor Blackler. Thank you. Any comments? Okay, I'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That is carried. And then the revised procurement policy that council adopts the policy. Do we have a mover for that? Deputy Mayor Haley and a seconder, Councillor Cowles. Any comments on that? We'll put it then. Those in favour, please say aye. And against? And that is carried. Thank you very much.
Mayor Kircher.
Yeah.
If I may, sorry to interrupt, but there was an additional motion from the community board under 611.
And then we moved on, Mayor Kircher. I do apologise, but I seem to recall you ruling just a moment ago that the matter could not, relating to an earlier agenda item, could not be revisited.
Yep. Yeah, no, totally right. We've moved on from the Waihemo Recreation Reserve item. Thank you. But we will carry on to the recommendation that's around the adoption. Let me see.
Of updated standing orders.
Updating the standing orders. Right, and the reason it's coming to us is because it hasn't gone to them and they're asking for it. The council does make that happen. So I will put that, ask for a mover and seconder for that. So we're back on page 106.
So you've just contradicted your earlier ruling.
No, we made a decision on the particular recommendation, and we finished that one. We haven't finished this one, and we will finish it. I'm sorry, Councillor Hopkins, you can argue all you want. You lost the opportunity when council decided not to receive your report. And
if I hadn't put the words receive it in the very beginning of the resolutions, it wouldn't.
Councillor Hopkins.
But no, that's fine.
Can you just cease now, please?
Yeah, certainly.
We are running behind and we need to move on. Thank you.
But I want just to be clear,
Councillor Hopkins.
With regard to the Waihemo,
I am moving on. We are dealing with this particular item on page 106, which we haven't addressed, which is the recommendation from the community board. Yours was not a request around a recommendation. It was called for a division, which we had already moved on from the report to the next one at that stage. if you want to understand the procedural differences between those, we can have a discussion later on. We are looking at the recommendation from the community board about the adoption of updated standing orders and the adoption of the updated code of conduct. Do we have a mover for that, please? Deputy Mayor Halaleli and second Councillor Linwood. There's no discussion on that. I will put it. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Thank you. And we've, yeah, I've still got that to go. Yeah. I just dealt with the other one. So we have a further recommendation from the Performance Audit and Risk Committee, which is the Treasury Strategy, which is on page 116. Move Councillor Hopkins, thank you. Seconded Councillor Linwood. Any discussion on that? I will put that one. Those in favour say aye. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Right, next we've got the ratification of submission on the resource management consenting and other system changes amendment bill. And we've got Mr. Campbell here to speak to this. It is ratifying a submission that's been sent in. Just want to cover off any key points to it, David, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mayor Kitcher. Just quickly in summary, this is part of the phase 2 of the resource management reform that government is working through. This is one of the least contentious and probably useful changes that has been suggested in the bill, hence largely our submission is supporting most of it. There was a draft submission pre-circulated, and I think the councillors that come back to me mainly with questions on some of the submission points. The key ones really on page 148, sort of a summary of what we've asked for changes. Some of the key things around including the through waters infrastructure and the definition of long-lived infrastructure. And that's, I think, common across a lot of other councils and the sector trying to get that included. One of the main ones which has caused a bit of concern is around the removal of ability to hold a hearing. That's on that clause 34, section 100. So we have suggested some changes there to retain that. There is a new section 106A, which is around the ability to decline land use consents where there's certain hazard risks. This largely mirrors section 106, which is the ability to decline subdivision consents. So it's kind of gives us another tool there to use. We have suggested some minor tweaks there to make it work a wee bit better, perhaps, but we do generally support it. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Just a few things we're seeking to be tweaked, but we're largely happy with a fair chunk of the bill as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kitcher. I have a couple on page 154. We talk about, there's a reference in your letter to the fact that a significant issue for us currently is how the amendments contained within this bill interface with implementation of the current RMA, while also looking forward towards proposed changes to national direction and the impending phase 3 reform. Council considers that urgent focus should be given to working with councils on implementation. So what are we specifically proposing, and what is the significant issue in terms of how the amendments interface with the implementation of the current RMA? That's question 1 on that page. I do have another one, but if I can put that to you, I'd be grateful.
Yes, thank you, Lou. Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. I guess knowing that there's quite a lot of reform signalled, we're just conscious that when small changes like this are made, they are then kind of integrated with what's coming up, and that's kind of the key there in that second part of that sentence, while we're also looking toward the proposed changes to national direction. So as long as what's being drafted now doesn't kind of need to be undone or significantly redrafted, we're just signalling that there's that crossover needed. And yeah, just again, trying to stress that work with us. I know some councils and representatives from councils, including one of our staff, have been involved in some of this work to date. So just stressing that kind of, agency involvement.
Okay. So at the bottom of that page, clause 38, section 107G, formalises the often used draft consent condition process, including the ability to suspend the processing of the application. There may be some clarification needed on what constitutes within a reasonable time. So do we have a view on that? I mean, in other words, have we said to them, this is what we think a reasonable time should be? And the other question is, what are the implications of this suspending of the processing of the application?
It's sort of a funny one, because when you're at the very tail end of issuing a consent, often we do send out draft conditions now, and it's generally in the applicant's interest to turn it around pretty quick because it's holding up their own consent. What they're now introducing is this term within a reasonable time, and it's, some people might think a week, or some people might think a day. So we're just saying it's probably suitably vague, but I think by and large applicants will want to move things on anyway because it's in their interest to get the consent issued. So it's not a major thing, but we thought it could be clarified in the drafting of the legislation. We're not suggesting any time frame because it might depend on the circumstances.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
Yeah, I did reply to David, and thank you very much for your reply. I still have concerns about the whole thing, and to me it's a tick the box exercise after the event, really. I know we had to put it in. I will personally be voting against it just on the principle of that basis, that we haven't allowed to be voted, talked and discussed and debated. And I still totally disagree with the principle and the proposal to up the ante on cost recovery, enforcement and charges, considering it's a one-stop shop for those that are applying. Thank you.
Great question. Councillor, any questions? Okay, would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Hopkins. Second is Councillor Linwood. Thank you. Any further discussion? I will put that one. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against?
No.
That is carried. Thank you.
Could that be recorded, please?
Yep, good go, Councillor McCone. Okay, we are scheduled to stop for morning tea in 5 minutes. We've got the next item is the acceptance of the solid waste services business case, and I'm not sure whether it's worth. Well, we perhaps do the introduction before we do break, and just keep your questions ready from there. And to Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor Coach. I was going to suggest perhaps you want to take the alcohol report in that short time, because Andrew's here and we could probably get that in before morning tea.
Sorry, I didn't see Mr. Bardsley there. So, yeah, we will do that one. No, thank you. It's really good to see you're getting some exercise in there, Mr. Clark. Getting up and down there. Right, Mr. Bardsley, alcohol report.
Yes, good morning, councillors.
Sorry, I'll just go to the councillors' benefits, just page 214. Yep, floor is yours.
All right, good morning, councillors. Councillors required to provide an annual report to the Alcohol Regulatory Licensing Authority every year, and they're required to then report it to the Minister of Justice. Take the report as read. Councillor Hopkins is the chair of the District Licensing Committee and has provided some good feedback in regards to the activities of the District Licensing Committee. So welcome any questions you may have, or maybe I can defer to Councillor Hopkins.
Councillor Blackley.
Thank you. I just had a question on page 218 in relation to the question and answer around the local alcohol policy. And I just wanted to ask what's involved in developing a local alcohol policy, and do the recent changes in legislation in 2023 mean it would be easier for a community to achieve their desired outcomes with respect to a policy, and how could a local alcohol policy be used to a community's advantage from a social and economic perspective?
Thank you, Councillor. Local alcohol policies are designed to give the communities more input in regards to alcohol licensing matters. It's specifically designed to give them more input, more ability to actually be part of the process. The changes to the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act in 2003, specifically in regards to public participation bill, also has gone a long way to achieving that aim. And we saw an example of that last year in regards to some quite strong community opposition towards 2 licenses, which resulted in them removing their application before it got to our district licensing committee. The thing with bylaws and policies is that before you embark on that journey of looking at implementing one, is to make sure that it's the best way of dealing with any issues. So for a local alcohol policy, you'd need to look at, do we have an issue? And in regards to that, we'd look to the Ministry of Health, the police, and our own district licensing officer in regards to identifying issues around the sale and supply of alcohol, and how a liquor, how an LAP would actually help us to deal with those issues. So it would be a community involvement, local agencies such as the police and the Ministry of Health, and then identifying what issues we do have, and then maybe looking at whether an LAP would actually help to deal with those.
Thank you. And yeah, good to know that, because previously, before that change, it was, yeah, as much as we wanted to do an LAP, the chances of it actually succeeding and staying in place without significant cost to the community was a deterrent at that stage. So, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor Coach. I would just like to acknowledge the work of the District Licensing Committee. This report is always a point just to stop and acknowledge the work that they put in behind the scenes, particularly Councillor Hopkins, who does an enormous amount of work on decisions on the papers behind the scenes. And in his absence, or if there's a conflict, then Barry McDonald, our Commissioner. So I think that should be acknowledged.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Hopkins?
Well, look, if I just make a very brief comment or two. On page 100 and 215 under analysis and discussion, the chair in the third paragraph, it says the chair has attributed this to the positive changes made by Parliament in 2023. I've gone through all my answers and I don't describe them as positive anywhere, nor do I deem them to be negative. They're simply changes. And certainly people who think that it's good for people, the community, to have easier access to appeals and the like, would definitely deem them to be positive. The other thing I would just say to members, you may looking through this, you can see the answers to the questions that ALA requires us to provide. And you can see how there's been no new licenses refused, no new off licenses refused, no new club license. Well, basically, we've turned nothing down. Now, that might suggest that we're being very hands-off and just not taking a particularly conscientious approach. But bear in mind that the reports that Mr. Cook has referred to, the decisions made on the papers, require recommendations from our district licensing inspector and require direction, recommendations from the police and the medical officer of health, who are deemed to be reporting agencies, who have an official role. Now, if they say they're happy, if they say that they're perfectly content that somebody gets an off license or an on license or a manager's license, on what basis can one say no? What you can do sometimes is vary the conditions. And in a lot of instances lately, I have reduced the number of hours allowed for the sale of alcohol so that they don't coincide with the the hours for the event itself, because I think it's most unfortunate to have alcohol sales continuing right up to the point that they say everyone go home. So very often a license may be issued, but with conditions that may differ from those that were sought by the applicant initially. So we do go through them carefully and thoroughly, but we can't just arbitrarily say no if everyone else is signal they have no objection whatsoever.
Sorry, can I just say I apologise if I've misconstrued your comments in your report and putting something positive in there. There's noted. Sorry about it, councillor.
Okay. Someone like to move, we receive that report, councillor Cowles, and seconded councillor Holding. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I will put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. We'll break now for morning tea and we'll endeavour to be back at 10:45. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. So just back from morning tea, and if we just go now to where we're going to the acceptance of the solid waste services business case. So it's councillors, it's on page 158, and hand over to Mr. Cook.
Thank you, McCutcher. Some of you may recall that this paper was actually originally scheduled to come to you before Christmas. For various reasons, it was rescheduled. And what a difference time makes. So in that time, just before Christmas, we were looking at the potential of the government mandating curbside collections. They've subsequently decided that they will not be mandating council-controlled curbside collections. We're also aware that there's some quite contrasting views, both in the chamber and in the community, probably, as to whether we should be providing council-controlled curbside collections. We've thought very long and hard about the recommendation and the proposal because of those contrasting views. Firstly, we ask you today to receive the business case. Receiving it is an important part to close out the funding that we've had from MFE. I want to remind you that the funding of this work has so far been paid for by the funding from MFE and the waste levy. There's also funding available, currently ring-fenced at MFE, for progression of curbside collections. And just recently this week, it's reported in the media that Ashburton received some $864,000 from MFE to support the rollout of curbside organic collections. There's 5 councils nationally in our situation that don't currently offer council-controlled curbside collections, and MFE have confirmed that there are still 3 actively considering the rollout. So therefore today it's really as to whether you feel like making a fairly short-term decision and drawing this to a close, or whether you want to make a long-term decision and proceed to find out what the community wants and engage in public consultation at some point. And we haven't set a date in the recommendation. We hope that if that's the way that you choose to go, that you'll give us some indication of whether it's something you wish to take forward in your triennium or something for the new council to look at when they're elected later in the year. Steve and Lucianne have worked closely on this. They know the business case intimately and are here to answer questions, but I would suggest we don't get into the detail of the business case because all you're doing is receiving it today.
Just check with Lucianne and Steve. Did you have any comments you want to make, or we go straight to questions? Questions, okay. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, a couple of questions. I take your point about not getting into the detail of the business case, and so I won't discuss the business case calculations regarding current and projected future costs for individuals. But I do notice that on, I think it's page 170, there's a reference to the fact that if we are going to do this curbside collection, because of the costs involved, we'd have to do a Section 17A review first. Now, the business case does state that the business, on page 170 of our agenda, that the business case includes aspects of a Section 17A review, which implies to me that it's not a full Section 17A review. Is it correct that we would still have to do one, and how comprehensive would that need to be, and how long would it take?
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins, through the chair. I have to admit that I'm not fully conversant with 17A reviews. My understanding of them is that a large part of the business case would contribute to that, and it would be a review of the existing services and how they meet the needs of the community.
Okay, look, supplementary to that, my next question is, if we adopt the business case today, are we adopting what is on page 201, the time frame? Because the time frame on table 20 on page 201 of our agenda is clearly no longer applicable, because it implies, well, this time frame starts with consultation on the recommended option with elected members in 2024, consultation on the recommended option with the community in early 2025, procurement planning, approval for funding of new services early 2026. So if we adopt the business plan, are we committing to this timeline, or are we allowing ourselves some latitude or alternatives in that regard?
Thank you again, Councillor Hopkins. I note that the table at 20 at the top of page 201 does indicate that it's an indicative timeframe. And as I stated, I'm asking you to receive the business case, not necessarily approve the business case.
One more question, if I may. Finally, look, just looking at the cost options for the curbside collection, we have option A is either up to from 3.3 million rate funding to 3.9 million, and option B is 3.4 million to 3.7. But then with food organics and green organics, the costs go up to 3.8 million to 4.1 million per annum. But if you look at the chart on page 211, if you add up all the total costs showing for council in that table, that comes to 7,471,481. So what is the correct potential cost figure?
An officer give an indication of that, please.
We're just looking at that you refer to in the business case, Councillor Hopkins. I think it's important to note that these are modelled costs. Definitive costs will come through the procurement process, and this is based on benchmarking around the country. As the business case also notes, there is a lack of data in some areas, and that those modelled costs are to the best of their ability. We're just trying to answer your question on the adding up cost by timing where you reference it. We may need the question repeated, or we may need to come back to you on that question, Councillor Hopkins.
Just very briefly, on page 192, we have some cost options, and I've gone through those. They vary from 3.3 to 4.1. But then if you look at the costs itemised and broken down under various headings on page 211 and replicated on page 212, if you tally up all of those quantums of cost identified in various categories, various lines, if you add the total of those costs up, it's 7,471,481,000. So I was just really trying to establish whether we're looking at 3.3, 3.9, 3.4, 3.7, 3.8, 4.1, or 7.4.
We'll probably need to go back and look at those figures in depth to be able to answer that for you, because I can't calculate them in my head looking at them just on the page.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That's right, it's not all three. So that in the appendices, that's looking at all of the options, the long list options, and then what is in the tables above is taking those long list options and turning them into short list options, and then the costs are modelled on those short list options.
it's a smorgasbord and you're not allowed to have everything, Jim.
Well, I make the point that that's not what page 211 and 212 say, but still, let's not worry about it.
It gives us the ability to pick and choose the frequency of collection, the size of bins, and each of the different types, and so you just choose which one. Councillor Black, will you?
Thank you. Yeah, I actually have bearing in mind the request about not getting into specifics, I have 8 to 10 specific questions about the business case and the direction taken and subsequently the modelling. So my question with that in mind is how do elected members approach addressing our concerns about detail and directions taken in the business case that would impact the direction consultation with the community may take? And second to that, how did officers go about working through rolling in or out suggestions elected members made to drive direction of the business case?
So the business case has been created through a number of workshops with councillors and presented through a number of workshops and briefings through councillors. To take this forward, I would suggest that if public consultation is what you want, upon receiving the business case, we would then come back through briefings to say, what are we taking forward? What are we talking about to the community? Are you comfortable with those options? That would be a further iteration.
So it's supplementary. If there are matters that elected members may or may not agree that would have been good to have fully costed out or analysed, so as to being able to go forward to the community with some numbers in behind possible opportunities, how could we go about addressing that retrospectively if it's not already included in the business case?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
So in the business case, there's a number of scenarios that have been explored further, which include some of the things we discussed in earlier workshops, but there's other ideas that were discussed amongst the wider group, which I feel may have had support to have been at least investigated further and costed out, etc. So if they don't appear in the business case now, then how would we go about rolling them in or out in a logical way for consultation with the community?
I think the most appropriate way would be to take it through the workshop and briefing process to identify those. These are modelled costs based on options that would be feasible across the district. But what I think you're asking for is a level of detail which wouldn't be prepared at this level. Today, we're really seeking guidance as to whether this is now the end or whether you wish us to do more work on this, with the ultimate aim to going to seek public feedback on it. The important thing today is that you receive the business case, because that needs to close the loop with MFE and the funding grant, and then you give us future direction as to whether you want to take it forward, whether you want to close it out now, or whether you want the new council to take it forward.
Yeah, that was the essence of the question I wanted to ask, which was, if we just receive this now, does it just stop, or do council do officers go away and do something? Because that's not just receiving there's an implication to receiving the report. If you're saying you actually want clearer direction on that, there probably should have been a recommendation to that effect.
So I think the recommendation is that in there that you receive it and consider then moving to public consultation. That would be the next logical stage to the process. But you could choose not to go to public consultation. You could just receive it, and the business case is left lying there, and the new council can choose to pick it up or not. I think what Councillor Blackler is asking for is some further work to be done, and I think depending on what the nature of that is, I think we could explore that through workshops, and we would then need to, depending on what that looked like, recommission or commission some new work to explore those options, which would be outside the business case. Ideally, those issues would have been raised at the start of this process, so that they could have been looked at through this business case process. We're at the end of that now, so it would mean commissioning new work, depending on what those options were. So I think the decision is quite clear for the council. The work has been done as specified, as agreed by council, and it's for council to receive it and then decide whether it wants to do anything further with it or not.
Thank you. Councillor Blackler, did you have a subsequent question? Councillor Percival, Councillor Ryan, and then we've got our online participants with their hands up as well.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. To me, this is Groundhog Day. A few years back, we did the same exercise. The staff did bins, collection, all sorts of ways to dispose of rubbish. And if I remember rightly, that was soundly rejected by the community as far as an option, and hence we are doing what we still do. I'd like to know where that report is and the conclusions for that report that was made then.
Mr. Cook.
Yeah, this work was started under the previous government when they were indicating that there'd be mandated curbside collections through the local authorities, particularly obviously for those councils that didn't have it. So as I said, the funding was made available by the MFE, 50% funding. The other 50% came from the waste levy, which also comes from MFE. The landscape, as I said in my introduction, has changed significantly. Then the government has been replaced. New government has indicated that they won't be mandating. We're at the conclusion of this phase, and it's now whether you wish to take it further.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. When we're considering the unknown costs in terms of what people are paying at the moment, for their waste and recycling, because we don't have access to that information from private providers, would consultation not be the best way to kind of get a better idea of the costs that our households are facing at the moment, because we don't have access to those private statistics?
Indeed, that would be a significant benefit, and why we put the recommendation that we do, that we at least go to the public and say, is this something you want?
Councillor McCone.
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of work and put into this on political direction, and I sympathise with where it's got to, but the political direction has changed immediately. So I have two questions in that. What happens if we do not receive the business case? I think it's been said, but I just would like clarity on it. Does it get parked up and disappear into Neverland until it comes again? And where I'm really coming from in the entity is that we have that much on our plate now. Do we want to lumber ourselves with something else when we do have private enterprise running a pretty good service as it stands?
Thank you. Lucienne.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that what the business case has shown us is that there is a lot of room for improvement. We know that a lot of what goes to landfill from our community doesn't need to go there, and that the current system we have is not as efficient as it could be. So if the business case does kind of end here, we probably need to look at how we continue to do better, because we can do better. And what we've got at the moment isn't the best that we can have in terms of meeting our council community outcomes and valuing our environment and exploring those economic development opportunities to be prosperous. So I think there's real merit in continuing this process regardless. It's we can stage it. I think the business case gives us those options to explore when we go to the community and over what bits. So there are multiple iterations of how we continue from here. And I think it's just really important to remember when we consider this decision that ultimately it is about having a more efficient waste system and sending less to landfill and making sure that we can enable our community to do that in some way so that we do have a better waste system overall.
If I may, I suppose what I'm asking is what happens if we do not receive the business case? Are we liable for any of this funding that we've had to do it, or what are there any ramifications behind the scenes?
So,
Sorry, John.
What Councillor McCone is asking is there any consequence if we don't proceed any further with this business case at this stage, given the government is not mandating it anymore?
Yes.
In terms of if you don't choose not to receive the business case, and remember, as I said at the beginning, I'm not asking you to say that you agree with the content. I'm asking you to say that you've received the business case. We are required to present a record of the decision to MFE, and I would suggest that they probably might not send us the money if we aren't able to do that. So that would probably be $25,000 decision, I think it is. In terms of whether you choose to take it forward, no, there would be no consequence immediately if we didn't take it forward. The community may have a view that you've elected not to ask them. That I don't know. You're in touch with the community. As Lucianne's pointed out, we wouldn't be doing the best we could for the environment and the diversion, and it would be a missed opportunity, I feel.
Can I just clarify? So, as the government is not mandating curbside recycling anymore, is it still keeping to the targets that it wants councils to meet in terms of increasing recycling rates and diverting from landfill?
No, so there were 5 remaining proposals that they were reviewing, and they're not progressing with any of those. So the mandated diversion targets, we're not going to be made to meet those. However, we do still have a national waste strategy that has an aspirational view of getting us to a low waste and low emission society by 2050 with sort of some targets built into that. So while we're not having the legislative sort of back up to that, we still definitely have that national waste direction that says that as a country, all of us have a responsibility to do better in this space. And, that's at local government level with giving our community options and an efficient and reliable and accessible service, and also, at a higher level with infrastructure across the country and a framework to back up that system. So overall, it's much more efficient because we're not alone. As Roger mentioned, a lot of councils are coming on board and doing this because as a country, we've got to do better, and we're one of the few that are not opting to do that yet.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just see if technology allows. Mr. Cook's mentioned that we've had consultation through workshops. I've been extremely consistent through all those discussions. I'm totally opposed to the concept that Big Brother can do better than an education system that encourages individual responsibility. We constantly see costings come through this council that make those of us who work in the private sector shake with horror. And I would much rather see us invest in education of our community and support for our recycling centre, which being upped, because whilst we might be an outlier, we've been an outlier in a positive way. And I would certainly encourage my colleagues to continue to view that as a way to go, as against us putting out to tender a process when there are currently 3 local businesses operating in that space. So 2 of them are going to lose, possibly all 3 of them. So I'm happy to receive the report, and then I believe it should be parked. And this is not a criticism of the work that staff have done. I commend them for that. It's a philosophical position that if we as individuals can't be responsible for what we do, and we've already discussed that this morning in the public forum around the benefits of water metering and people being aware of what they cause. Having a wheelie bin out the front and being able to wave it goodbye is like flushing the toilet and having no further thoughts as to where the waste goes. So I'm totally opposed.
So if I can, I just add a clarification that there's no proposal in here in the recommendation to go out to tender for waste collection services at the moment. The proposal is to receive the business case and to consult the community to gain their views on what the future direction should be for this council. No tender process is proposed at this stage.
All right, back to Councillor Ryan and then Councillor Hopkins.
Oh, I was just happy to move the recommendation, but perhaps Councillor Hopkins.
Well, I was going to move an alternative recommendation, so it's up to you to decide who you're going to have first.
Does someone want to move simply that we receive the report?
No.
Councillor Ryan and seconded Deputy Mayor Haulele. That we received the report. We've been told this is important for getting our money back on from MFE, who are paying for it. So pure and simple. That's
well, I'll second
what we're talking about. Already seconded.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
Councillor Ryan, would you speak to that?
Thank you. I mean, I would also like us to go further and approve the community engagement for a curbside collection service too. But ultimately receiving the report, like this is a really exciting opportunity for us to take a step forward to a more sustainable future for waste management in Waitaki. The business case presents us with a compelling case for why we need to explore this with the community. Central government has stepped back from mandating council curbside collections, but that's not any reason to deter us from doing what's right for our district. We've got to take control of our own waste future, not just because it's good for the environment, but because we need to make sure we're doing everything in the most effective way to ensure that all of our residents, regardless of where they live, have access to a reliable, efficient and affordable waste service. And a council controlled service has the potential to provide better value for the majority of our community. The status quo is inconsistent, inefficient and costly for many. I've spent lots of time talking to newcomers to the district who have been so shocked that we don't have an efficient council curbside collection. And I've also engaged a lot of people from low waste households who actively recycle and do the right thing. And I acknowledge that the cost of a curbside collection may be more than what they currently pay, but this also provides opportunities for us to open up new opportunities for them to do more. And I hope by going to consultation, ideally, we engage with them and get their feedback and get a better understanding of household costs, that at present have been questioned. Yes, individual responsibility, absolutely, there's work to be done in that space, but having lived somewhere that has introduced curbside collection, the behavioural change is incredible. And it's hard to get people to do the right thing, to see the bigger picture. And most importantly, this should not be our decision to make. It's one that we should take to the community. I acknowledge that it's been in the community before, but I fully support moving towards community engagement. Our residents deserve to have their say on a service that directly impacts their lives, their rates and their future. And I hope we can have a meaningful conversation with them about what a better waste system for Waitaki could look like, making more component decisions, meeting today's needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own.
Thank you. Any other speakers to that motion? Haulele?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm supportive of this. I think also because we actually supported our officers to complete, and go through the process of undertaking a business case. So I'm supportive of that from that aspect. Also in terms of the strategic community outcomes that we actually had agreed to at the start of our at the start of this election period. One of them is our environmental outcomes that we would helpfully try and do things to help support. And I do acknowledge Councillor Blackler's views just in terms of perhaps whether there is some additional feedback that is needed, and that's the methodology of the business case that I would probably ask for consideration, just to ask about. And then also acknowledging Councillor Thompson's views in terms of preventative, and I think that could be part of, like what the solutions are once we receive feedback from the community. So I'm supportive of this being received, and then we can have a staged approach in terms of what the next steps are. But yeah, I do urge our team just to continue to keep us updated with the process of the business case, and if there is feedback and how that can be weaved in into that. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to put that we receive the business case. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That's carried.
Councillor, may I move a second resolution, please?
You may.
I move that council approves officers to prepare for community engagement, setting out the costs and benefits of our current recycling, diversion and minimisation facilities, and the costs and benefits of introducing council-controlled curbside collection services so ratepayers can signal their preferred option.
That's right. Second that. Thank you.
In that case, thank you, Rebecca. I greatly appreciate that. And I've included the current because let's acknowledge there is disagreement and debate around the table as to what the optimum solutions are. It is quite possible that a curbside collection could improve the quantum of material collected. It's also a fact that at the moment, 90% of everything dropped off at Chelmer Street is recycled, and it is getting premium prices, whereas commingled recycling is substantially reduced in value. And there was a story in the ODT last Monday, Southland are upping the ante because at least 20% of all the so-called recycling there is contaminated and can't be used. There was a letter from a local resident to the same paper saying you only have to put a milk bottle top in the recycling bin, and the whole bin is binned, goes to landfill, because the milk bottle top actually causes problems for everything else. So there's a downside to curbside collection as well as an upside. And there's also the Section 17A matter of affordability. Yes, it would be nice to have it at no extra cost to ratepayers than exists now, but the business case offers or indicates that the cost of doing what is mooted could be as much as 3.3 to 4.1. So people may say, yes, let's pay for it. We're quite happy. That's a necessity that we'll happily add to the bill. But if there is a more affordable, more effective solution, merely because, as Jim said, we're in a minority, doesn't mean we're wrong. And it may mean, picking up on a point that was made by one of the submitters to the public forum this morning, it may be that we haven't been positive enough about the benefits of the system we've got at the moment. I'm a convert. I thought originally that all the separation and all of that approach taken was unduly pedantic, if you like. I'm now totally persuaded it is the recycling solution. And merely because we're in a minority that applies it doesn't mean it's wrong. So I think that's why I've moved that if we're going to have public consultation, because in the past, and I think Councillor Percival may be wrong, I think in the past there's been very close division in terms of people in favour of curbside and not in favour of. In other words, it's a sort of 49-51 kind of call, or has been in the past. So given that the community appears to be divided, given that the council itself appears to be divided, I think if we're going to consult, and it can't be this year, I don't think, because we haven't even started the Section 17A yet. If we're going to do it, we've got to say, here's what we're doing. here's what's good about it and what's bad. Here's what we think we might do. Here's what's good about that. Here's what's bad. You tell us what you prefer. And I'm very glad that we're going to have an opportunity to vote on this one. And I would encourage all of you to support this proposition.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
I absolutely acknowledge that the Waitaki Resource Recovery Park does a fantastic job. But the reality is our current diversion rates are well below the national average. And a council controlled service also has potential to provide better value for the majority of our community while supporting local businesses and ensuring we meet our responsibilities. So I'm happy for, I like it. That'd be great if we present all of the options to the community and they can make an informed decision based on the information that we have.
May I ask a question of our officers?
Do you need to?
Well, I just, it's a question of clarification. As I understand it, the evidence that we are below the national average is because the survey they've done is at the transfer station and they've looked at what could be recycled there. They haven't taken into account what people may have taken to Chalmers Street in the first instance. Is that correct?
Anything that goes to Chalmers Street winds up at the transfer station out at the north end. So it will be considered, yeah.
I thought Chalmers Street sold directly to various supply.
Are you talking about waste or recycling?
Yes.
Waste?
No, recycling.
Recycling?
Yes.
That's, yeah. So the survey that was done at the transfer station produced some numbers around what could have been diverted. Yep. Yep. That's correct.
Yeah, well, as always, I'm going to agree with Councillor Hopkins on this one. It is very much a split community as far as those who want it and those who don't. Personally, my rubbish and recycling costs are very low because we do recycle a heck of a lot, and we are able to ring our contractor and get stuff picked up when we need it rather than a truck having to come around every week. Equally, we've got a huge cost to our community with 3 trucks going around every street to pick up rubbish and 2 trucks going around picking up recycling. And that community cost is appreciable. As much as I don't want to put that, some of that cost onto rates, it does provide the service that a lot of people are calling for as well. Because, like Councillor Ryan, I've also had plenty of people saying that they would like to have rubbish. Well, some say they'd like to have it free. Basically, they're saying they'd like to have it included in their rates. It will be an extra cost, but getting an understanding of what that looks like, I think is important. And if we can examine as much opt-in, opt-out as we can, so that people are doing their own thing and don't need the service, that maybe they don't even have the service, but others may choose small bins rather than large bins and pay accordingly. So a form of user pays, at least. I know we can't cover every need, but to try and get some customization in that system would be helpful. So I'll be supporting it. Councillor McCone.
Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up. At the moment, it is people can dump rubbish by choice and pay the bill. Once you become compulsory, then it's an ongoing charge annually that has to be paid into the rates. And I'm involved in something further outside the districts, and that is annually between $550 and $800 a year on the rates bill, and that's every year. So I think people must be aware that they must have the right to choose, or if they want it compulsory done, there'll be the pain of paying. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Do you need any other direction?
I suggest we consolidate our thoughts and come back to the council with those, and that will include sort of indicative timeframes that council can then agree, and the process going forward through a workshop or a briefing. We'll confer with the CE on it.
Thank you very much. Okay, Right, that's the big one out of the way. We'll get on to the what is next? Local water done well. Is that one next?
Well, then, I'm fine with that.
So we have some external people joining us for this particular discussion. I haven't got the list of them in front of me. Something.
I vote aye, yes. I haven't got it because I haven't got access to it. So far,
Okay, so we're just waiting for a couple of ones to join, but we can get started. So perhaps setting up some backgrounds. Who's Alex or Paul?
So Paul's going to do a bit of an intro to this. So the people waiting for online are our legal advisors who've been commissioned by the four councils to provide legal advice. And Andrew Strawn, who's our project manager for the four councils. But before I hand over to Paul, I just wanted to emphasise for absolute clarity, you're not agreeing today to enter into a joint water CCO. The purpose of today is to sign up to a process that looks at that thoroughly so that you can consider that as an option. I would say though that there is a partnership with the other three councils that is strong, and everyone is working with the intent of looking how we can make this work so that it works for our local community and for each of our councils as well. So I'll hand over to Paul.
Thank you. The discussion in the public forum was sort of a useful introduction to this topic, which is we are really faced with a very highly unusual and complicated situation, but the decision here is relatively straightforward. It is just a next step in really the whole local water done well process. So I think we need to keep focused on the decision that is before us today and not worry too much about the next steps in terms of this decision. As you said, that it is highly complicated and unusual that we have a very hard deadline that we need to meet in terms of delivering a water service delivery plan. At the same time, some of the legislation that we will need to meet that will set out what we need to provide in a water service delivery plan is still at the submission stage. So there's uncertainty around what we will need to include, but we need to keep making progress. When council last considered matters in relation to the delivery plan and local water done well, that was when we confirmed the position of the preferred option of a standalone CCO to be included in the LTP. That was the best position at the time because there was no viable alternative to that in terms of a grouping of councils to address this matter. A lot of progress has been made on this in a relatively short space of time. So now what we do have is three other councils that are prepared to work together have started doing the work. It really does need a firm commitment from all four councils for this to go any further. Luther and Gore have already considered this matter. They considered it last week and have confirmed their agreement and their commitment to the process. And I believe Central Otago is considering that today. So tomorrow. Thanks. But to be clear, it is a commitment to work together and do further work. At the tail end of the report, there is also an outline of the next steps, and they will come in reasonably quick succession. So the next decision will be far more detail about what the arrangement might look like. Then the one after that would be really the consultation material, because I think it is inevitable that we want to consult with the communities. Well, yeah, communities. So that's all four communities on this matter and try and do that at the same time. And then even after that consultation, there will be another decision point and another potential exit point. But we need to keep this moving so that we can, if it is the final decision, prepare a joint water services delivery plan by the deadline of the 3rd of September. But go back to it. This is a relatively simple decision. It is making a commitment to work with the other three councils. And that's the extent of it. So hopefully that's enough of an introduction. I think we've discussed this item on numerous occasions, and we're all sort of well aware of the what's happening in the local water done well space. So very happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Paul. We've just acknowledged too, we've got Andrew Strine and Alice Baum joining us. Andrew's been coordinating, project manager for our group of 4. Alice is with Wynne Williams, who's been advising us along the way. I do want just to add a little bit more, and that is around the other conversation we've been having, which has been with the South Canterbury Council, so Timaru, Waimati and Mackenzie. The discussions there have gone pretty well as well, and to the extent where they are interested in joining the Southern 4. So potentially it could be a grouping of up to 7. We're not agreeing to that today. We're focused on the 4. However, Timaru has just been notified that they are taking this same report to their council next Tuesday. So they are quite committed to working with us to explore options around that. And I believe Mackenzie and Waimati are also very interested in doing that. So I think Alex might be able to tell us what the process is if they do decide to get on. That maybe there's a paper that has to come back to us to ensure we do consider that they are as part of the consideration overall.
So we're obviously doing a lot of work, given that they've expressed a potential interest. I think we should say, they've obviously all 3 of those councils got to do some work across the council. Things have moved pretty quickly in that regard, but I think it's for them to reach a position on where they're at and notify us. Andrew in particular, as our project manager, is supplying with a lot of information. If they decided they wanted to join, then we'd have to bring a revised version back of this partnership agreement to acknowledge those other councils joining, if that's where they got to.
And just note, that with the group of 4, the Southern 4, we've got very good similarities, all population sizes of around 14 or 16,000 through to 26,000 people, quite rural with urban areas as well. Those other 3 councils spread the population from Mackenzie with 5,000 and 5,500 people through to Timaru with 50,000, but still all rural urban communities. So a lot in common with those ones. So going to questions now. So Councillor Blackstone.
Thank you. I just had 2 questions to start. I just wanted to understand, by signing this agreement, would we be obliged to be presenting this as our preferred option or just an option for consultation? And given we haven't yet consulted with the community, how would we potentially change the wording in throughout the document in multiple places to kind of signal that the work has been progressed on the basis that the joint operation may or may not occur, dependent on decisions made post consultation? I just feel like the agreement itself reads a little bit like it's a done deal. I know we've expressly said that's not what we're doing here, but that's the sense that I get when I read the agreement.
I suppose it's so we just could have covered it. This is a draft that was prepared or an outline that was agreed by the Department of Internal Affairs to sort of help move the process along. Wynne Williams have looked at it and made some suggestions in terms of making it appropriate for the 4 councils. And I think, with that, with the very clear understanding, this is just a first step. It doesn't commit it can't commit any of the councils because the public consultation will need to be engaged with, and you need to address any consultation with an open mind. So I think being very clear that there will be a process following this. I understand it may be a reading of it, but I don't think it commits council in any way to that.
I'll just add to that, the decision point on whether to go down this route of joining up with these councils is further on down the line, and that would be after public consultation. But a caution in this. So I mentioned earlier in the public forum that the legislation that's in force at the moment requires councils to consult on 2 options, whereas the bill that's going through Parliament at the moment talks about 3 options. And one thing we need to be cautious about is wasted effort. And I think that's what our partners will be cautious about as well. So really what we're committing to is to seriously look at this with our partners, and we're looking to try and avoid those who might just be looking at this so they've got a consultation option to go out there with when they're not actually serious about it. That doesn't mean we're committed to going through with it, but that means that we are working in good faith with those partners to look at how this could work for the best interests of our communities and their communities.
So in answer to my first question, where I was asking, would we be required to present this during consultation as our preferred option? What do you say?
So that's what I'm saying. When this comes back to council, I think we're talking about April decision. Andrew nod or shake head. I think it's April. It comes back to each council. That's when the decision point on whether this is the preferred option that you're going to consult on or not.
So, but just to confirm, by entering into this agreement, we're not required to take that. We're not agreeing to take that position.
So the process that's been sets out that it is further down the line once we've done some more modelling work and done some design work around what the entity might look like, that the council then, or each council, will be asked to decide whether this is the preferred option or not that it's going to consult on.
Andrew.
Yep. So I'll add a bit more flavour to that one. So the agreement basically says we're going to work together to investigate the joint CCO as an option, but it also anticipates if that becomes the preferred option, then it does provide us a framework and path to right through to implementation of that joint CCO. But there are exit points all the way through it. The work that we're bringing to councils for decision in March is here are the 3 options that are available to council. So leave it in-house, set up a standalone CCO, or join a joint CCO. So that option analysis and the pros and cons of all of that we bring to the council in March to inform a decision as to, right, based on all of that, what is the council's preferred delivery option that we want to take, that the council would like to take out for consultation. What is the preferred option? So that's the sort of the next decision point, and then we consult on that. And so the trust piece that we're all working to is that the will that we have as this group, and the analysis all leads us to a joint CCO. But if that's not the case, then that's where I think we can segue to Alice as to, in that scenario, what's the exit clauses, if you like, for the agreement. Shall I hand over to you, Alice?
Yep, can do. So the council has the opportunity to exit this agreement at any point in time up until the submission of the water service delivery plan right at the very end of the process. So you can decide to exit at any time. You'd do that by giving notice to your other councils, and then there are some provisions in the agreement just around the, I guess, practicalities of exiting with the financial commitments that you made to the other councils. But in a nutshell, you remain responsible for the money that you've already spent. You remain responsible for the money that you've committed to spend as part of the group. And that's committed or budgeted but unpaid money, to the extent that that cost can't be reasonably mitigated or avoided by the remainder of the group. So those are the only real practical consequences in terms of the agreement, and then obviously you'll have to work through what if you're not going to proceed with the joint CCO, pulling together everything that you'll need to still have your water service delivery plan submitted by September.
Thank you both for that. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, I have a couple of questions about the alternative consultation model, and one or two things on page 225 of our agenda. But just looking at the agreement itself, the document, question for you, Mayor Kircher and Mr. Palmley. On page 228, there's a reference to options that were considered, and it says the group of councils draft. Option one was that a group of councils draft their own commitment agreement. The advantages identified were that it was tailored for the group of councils' requirements, but we opted for this DIA template instead. I'm just wondering why we turned down. I can see the disadvantages you've cited, but I would have thought that the very fact that the document could have been tailored for the group's requirements made it a very attractive option. So that's question number one. And question number two, on page 241 of our agenda, also looking at...
Sorry, Councillor, if we're jumping around pages, best to deal with them one at a time.
So I think the answer is simply timing and cost. If we'd started drafting our own agreement when the government's already paid for government lawyers to put a draft agreement together that we can alter and flex to our own needs, it'd have taken us more time and it would have cost us more money. So it's an opportunity to save time and direct pay funds.
Thank you. Nice answer. Good answer. 241, page 241. Under the heading Development Expectations and Timelines, there's a subsection B. And we've talked today about the fact that we're working, there's a southern 4 and now possibly a northern 3. And I have mentioned this before, but I just do wonder whether this document shouldn't actually specifically allow for people other than the 4 specified councils to join in, whether there should be some. I can see no reference that says, hey, if anyone else wants to come in, we're definitely willing to have a chat. And what I'm worried about is somebody wants to get pedantic and say, there's nothing in the agreement that says you can, ergo you can't. So is there a view that even the loosest wording would be helpful?
I have completely opposite view. I think it would be unhelpful to what we're up against here. And the partners discussed this at some length, that given the timeline we have, if we're open to other councils joining at any point, that could totally derail us from developing a plan and being able to consult on that with our community and meet the legal requirements to submit a water service delivery plan in time. Now, what is open is that once this is up and running, if that's where each council gets to and decides to go down that route after consultation, that it'd be open to others joining after that point. But we've reached a point, and this has been discussed with government as well, whereby if we remained open to accepting other potential councils at this stage, we simply wouldn't meet legislative requirements.
I think along the way, the council's executive group, which is mayors and CEs, have discussed all of this, and variously we've described it as the door being open, the doors being ajar, the doors shut, as to how do we deal with other councils coming along. This is really if the other 3 councils, so the South Canterbury 3, join the Southern 4. So we make up to 7 councils, then that if Timaru's making their agreement next week, they're in time. So they're able to do that, and also they've got there's still work to be done around consolidating their figures into the other figures, but that has to be done. Equally, if Mackenzie and Waimate want to get on board, they need to get their agreement that they're on board very soon. So there are other councils, and I'll name a couple of ones. Queenstown was a maybe for quite some time. but they have been told that they are able to go alone, so that's fine. Southland District has been of two minds, but we've really let them know that the door is shutting. So there's a certain point where prolonging, anyone joining on is just going to hold everyone back. And we just don't have the time frame. We've got to have all of this everything agreed, consulted on, decided after that, and our water service delivery plan to the government by the 4th of September, and it's a really tight time frame. So we're certainly trying to be open as much as we can, but realistic.
I have a couple of other questions, but I also think Tim's got some more as well. So if I could just signal that there's a couple on page 225 I'd like to ask.
Well, you ask them now.
Well, okay, look, very quickly, have the draft wastewater standards that were due to be released in mid-February this year come out? There's a reference also there to price harmonisation. I thought that we had to have harmonisation within a specified time frame in the legislation. Is that correct? And just finally, it looks as though we are being told that we have to adopt an alternative consultation requirement that doesn't meet or doesn't have to meet certain Local Government Act 2002 tests. So can somebody just explain to me quite clearly? I'm looking at the information on that page. I'm just wondering, how is that alternative consultation requirement what it will mean, and is it going to be less or more work for us?
So, shall I say on that?
Oh, I was going to say wastewater standards due out today, I believe.
I think they're due out today, but they might not be, because there's a local government meeting up in Wellington later this week, and the ministers might be saving it for there. But we'll see if they come out today. But they're expected this week, and we'll have to take some time to digest those and see what they mean. And we've programmed that into the work to look at that and remodelling what that might mean in terms of costs for each of the councils that are involved in this. In terms of the consultation requirement, obviously, if there was a decision to move waters out of this council, it would be a significant decision that would normally require a change, an amendment to the long-term plan and a consultation on that, which is quite a rigorous process, I understand. And so the government has provided a less onerous approach to be able to consult on this important matter. The consultation is still required. We need to get our community's views, but it's less onerous than going through an LTP amendment process as required in the Local Government Act. And the price harmonisation one, that there isn't, as far as I'm aware, a legislative requirement for price harmonisation, but it is something that needs to be considered. But whether that's for councils to decide now, or whether that's for any new entity, should we get to that point, to propose to the councils what the route is, I think that's still in the mix, really, to be discussed as to what that looks like.
There's a heck of a lot of detail around harmonisation. It's our thought that if we move to it, there needs to be a period of time for councils to level up a bit more, make sure that we're more aligned with the level of our infrastructure and so on, and that could be between 5 years and 10 years before that happens. So we're not rushing towards that. That's not the goal at this stage. And I mean, one of the underlying principles is that for each of the councils involved, that our respective groups of ratepayers are not going to be worse off. They do benefit from this. We've got Councillor Blacker and Councillor McCone.
Thank you. It was just kind of a supplementary to earlier comments regarding the water service delivery plan timelines. How much of the joint work can be transferred directly across to a local CCO model or an in-house model in terms of completing those water service delivery plans if the decision was made not to progress the joint option? And is the work for the separate portions of work specific to those options being so any kind of specific items that wouldn't be included in the kind of joint framework, are they being progressed in parallel at present? And if not, how will we ensure their work could be initiated to meet the deadline.
So Paul might want to answer this in more detail, but you received a lot of the work we'd already done on the in-house and the standalone CCO option. So it's not happening in parallel because most of that work has already been done to model what that looks like to enable us to go down that route if that's what the council prefers. And when we go out to consultation, we will need to set out if we are consulting on those three options, so remaining in-house, standalone CCO and a joint CCO, we'll have to set out what each of those options looks like and the pros and cons of those options. So that work is happening. We'll probably need to update it. We're doing a lot of work with the other councils in terms of making sure that we are keep saying comparing apples with apples, that the financials and the assumptions behind that are the same assumptions because every council has a slightly different way of approaching things, so that we can make sure we've got good comparators. But that work has already progressed significantly. It'll probably need updating once we've tested the assumptions to make sure that we can give good comparators to our community when we consult.
No, I don't have anything really to add to that. We are very aware of the deadline and we'll be looking to there's such a significant overlap between the two requirements that I think by the time the decision is made would be able to go in either direction relatively seamlessly.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
Yeah, look, a few questions. Tim's pretty much covered off what I was going to ask. What is the consequence if we do join up with this and pull out before it gets put to the DIA? Does that leave us up a creek without a paddle and we have to do our own stuff with the CCO behind the system or whatever we're planning? That's the first part. Secondly, I noticed in the document, is it going to be tailor-made? Because it says in the back page that the entity will take action on the 1st of the 7th, 26. So that's almost 8 months after the event. The other question is, why do we need 3 more admin groups? Because it makes the thing top heavy to start with. And fourthly, we must never forget that we're moving the debt sideways from the council into another entity, but the ratepayer is still going to pay.
So first of all, I think the single CCO is that an option if we drop out of a joint CCO?
It's still an option to pursue, but as we've discussed earlier, there's decision points along the way, including you'll need to decide at some point what your preferred option is that you're going to consult on, and then once the consultation has happened, you'll then have another decision as to whether to stick with the preferred option or take another option. So that could be any one of the 3 options we've discussed: stay in house, a single council-owned CCO or a joint CCO. So all those are still on the table at the moment, still being examined.
What I was asking though, Alex, is if we pull out, where does that leave us before the time it gets submitted to the DIA?
Pull out altogether now of this collaboration with other councils. Is that the question?
Yes. So, yeah.
So I would, defer to a colleague online to talk about the legal consequences, but in terms of the legislation that's going through Parliament at the moment, it might leave us not in a position not to be able to fulfil the legislative requirements of being able to consult on 3 options as is set out in the bill at the moment, because we might not have a serious third option. We would only have the in-house option and the single council-owned CCO, because we wouldn't have a worked up third option to consult on.
Thank you. Look, much as I'd like to continue, I've got to leave, so we'll catch up later on. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any other questions?
My question is very simply in terms of what Councillor McCone's just asked. Isn't that effectively the decision in front of us today? If there's a recommendation, 3 recommendations, agreeing to enter into, et cetera, if we are of a view that that's not preferred or an option, let's forget the word preferred, then surely if Councillor McCone doesn't think we should do it, then today's the day that he and others might vote accordingly. Am I not right?
I believe he was saying if we proceed here, but if we drop out at any point, and there are a number of off ramps where we could drop out, that's what happens then. So yeah, that was what I took.
Okay.
I think you would know from Councillor McCone if he wasn't wanting to be in this today, you would have heard that. Okay, look, yeah, to progress this, I'll move the recommendations as they are presented on page 223. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Cowles, thank you. Speaking to it very briefly, yeah, I think this is a good step. It's investigating, working with these ones. It's not that we will be a joint CCO, but I think it is a case of, you know, being stronger together and having some a good number of councils, potentially up to 7 councils that have got similar issues and similar situations as us, similar demographics, similar topography and so on, that it's going to be very helpful for us to get the best deal for our ratepayers. Taking it to the next step isn't obliging us to be in that joint CCO, but it does get us to look into it properly. Does anyone else want to make any comments? I will put it then. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew and Alice. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys.
See you at the next meeting.
Indeed.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
So, well, it's an item for the briefing because the council's executive group allows for a +1 councillor to join there. So that's going to be on our briefing today. Right. We now move to the Observatory Village loan repayment. Hand over to Amanda Nichols. Welcome, Amanda.
Good morning. So this report has 2 purposes. One, to inform you of the early loan repayment that we received from Observatory Village on the 3rd of February this year. There's a table that outlines the principal and the interest that we received on that date, and I've also discussed the foregone interest that we would have received if it had held to the intended maturity date. So Observatory Village was lent these funds from the available reserves at the time back in the day, and overall it's been a successful project, and they are now in a position to obtain funding from another source and have chosen to do so in order to complete the next stages of their development. So yeah, they've taken the opportunity to repay us early. And then the second part of the report is to seek approval to utilise the funds to repay our GFA debt. So I've proposed that that's the most prudent option to do so. There's a table that outlines pros and cons of other available options. Currently, the funds are sitting in term deposit, which I have put to mature on the 15th of April 2025, which is the next available opportunity where we have some debt maturing. So I could utilise the funds then to repay debt. So is there any questions?
Thank you. Nominally, some of this debt comes from some of the reserves that we have within council, one of them being the Harbour Endowment Fund. Is it feasible to allocate some of the money to go back into that fund so we can actually use some of that money for what it was intended for?
Yep. So reserves have funding on paper. So any reserves that previously had the money taken out, physically cash taken out to provide to Observatory Village, they will be refunded, but we won't physically hold the cash. It'll be there on paper and we'll be able to draw that down at any point we need to utilise those reserves. But yeah, we don't hold reserve funding in cash. we would pay down debt so that we're not paying interest on that and then utilise it whenever we need to use that reserve.
Thank you. Councillor Holding.
Sorry, I mean, do you have the breakdown of the total funds, what pools they come from? Was it all Harbour down?
I don't have the breakdown of what reserves they came from back in the day. Those reserves, like whatever amount those reserves had in them at the time, we haven't taken the money out of it. So say there was 2 million in that harbour reserve, it would have still been 2 million, but not physical cash held. So the reserve balances has not been affected whatsoever. It's just a paper transaction. There's nothing has been taken out of those reserves to make this happen. It's just the funds have been utilised to provide for income, while instead of just sitting there in your bank account, we've lent it out to Observatory Village to earn return on it.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Amanda, a couple of things. On page 257, towards the bottom of the page, you say we are unable to make ad hoc debt repayments to LGFA. So instead, the cash has been used to pay capital expenditure without the need to take out any further borrowing from LGFA. And the balance has been put into term deposit. Sorry if you've explained some of this while I was out of the room. But can you just actually explain? Sorry if it's a dumb question, but if we can't make ad hoc debt repayments to LGFA, and instead we're using the cash to pay capital expenditure, how does that tell you with the recommendation that we approve utilising the early loan repayments to repay LGFA debt? That's question number one.
Okay, so it's a bit like having a fixed mortgage. To break a mortgage, it's the same sort of term. So that's why I say we can't repay the LGFA debt early. So it's set to mature at a certain time. So it makes sense to hold it until that time and then refresh all our debt borrowings at that point. And in terms of borrowing for CapEx, think of it as two different transactions. So council has received the 16 million at the start of the month. And then on the 20th of the month, I've needed to pay creditors. So instead of borrowing to pay creditors on the 20th of the month, I've just used that funds that's sitting there in the meantime. So it's instead of making two transactions.
The net result is the same.
Yes.
Right. So my other question on page 258, again, at the bottom of the page, talking about utilising the funds to provide loans to other entities, and you list issues, and the very last sentence on that page, it is a public document, so there might be questions asked by members of the public. Sentence reads, Council has previously experienced negative outcomes from lending to other entities. Now, I was racking my brains to try and work out what those negative outcomes were. Well, sorry, I mean...
Yeah, I think Amanda's about to answer.
I don't think I need to name any, but you can hear about those in the park committee later. Yeah, so a lot of them are not paying interest to cover the interest that we are paying LGFA. A lot of them are struggling to repay the intended principal repayments when they were expected in line with their loan agreements. Some are actually requesting that we gift the loan to them, provide a grant, because they cannot physically repay what they've borrowed. That's what I mean by negative impact.
I'm mildly alarmed. When you say a lot aren't repaying, I'm not aware of any, I haven't seen any material that indicates that a lot aren't repaying. Again, we're in a public meeting. Is there an issue here?
I think there's a danger that we might be reaching commercial confidentiality if we go into too much of that information now. I think this was an initial risk assessment to enable them to make a decision. We have discussed with council, informal council in PE, about risks with certain entities. It's not all. It doesn't cover the majority of the funding, but there are certain entities who the council has lent money to that have been discussed with this council in public excluded that are a risk.
That's acknowledged, but that's slightly different from saying a lot aren't repaying. In fact, it's quite significantly different. and I'm rather relieved that what you've actually said is there are some risks that we've talked to you about, but that's not the same as saying a lot aren't repaying.
I think, one well-known situation we have is with the Honourable Whitestone Civic Trust, where they are making repayments and paying down interest, but they also, have been in discussions around whether there's a forgiveness of that debt. So those are discussions we have, but no decision made, because nothing's come back to us and no proposal as to how any loan would be repaid if it was forgiven, because the money has to still come from somewhere. Right, any other questions? Okay. I did have an additional motion that I was going to make, which was allocating $300,000 to the Harbour Endowment Fund to replenish some of its reserves that were taken out of it. But if we are all comfortable with the idea that we pay all of the money to offset debt, and that we can still look at the finishing the harbour area car park, then I'd be quite happy to just proceed with that and deal with the car park, second stage of the car park, whenever it comes up. Have you had feedback on that, Councillor Hopkins?
Well, it did occur to me in that regard that we do have, we did at one point put some property on the market, the harbour property, and there's at least one section down there that we had called for expressions of interest. That's the one on the corner of the Esplanade. And, let's look at options like that in addition as funding sources.
Well, if the funds are in there,
yeah,
nominally, it's just that it's been taken out to use for something else. So, and that includes money where, the motel went, for example. So
yes, but I'm just saying there are also alternative
sources
by which we can replenish the Harbour Endowment Fund. That's all. So I agree with you about it, just leaving it as the two we have at the moment.
Okay, someone want to recommend those? Move those, sorry. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Ryan, thank you. Any further discussion on it? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. Right, what are we up to now? Minutes. So we've obviously got a lot of sets of minutes. Councillor Hopkins has passed on some amendments for a number of them, and he has assured us that there are no changes of significance to any of them. Councillor Ryan.
I just had a question in my document. The July meeting is actually just a copy of the 27th of August minutes. You've pointed that out? Okay.
Yes. No, there was a wee test put in there just to see who'd actually. So you and Councillor Hopkins both passed that test. So that will be amended. Are there any other? I'm just taking them as a group on any of them. Does anyone have any particular issues or comments that they want to make?
Well, look, if I may very briefly, I did go in and see Glenn yesterday. I give you my absolute assurance that the changes were grammatical or typographical. Mr. Neil was in the room at the time and has verbally confirmed since then that I wasn't changing the meaning of anything, and I just didn't want to gobble up meeting time when we had a busy and full agenda. I've got the corrections I passed on to Glenn marked, and I can show them to you, Your Worship, if you Mr. Mayor, if you wish, just to satisfy yourself that I'm not playing fast and loose with the truth.
Thank you for filling in for Councillor Thompson there. So if you're happy to move with those amendments, the adoption of all those minutes, Councillor Hopkins, and someone would like to second those, Councillor Ryan. But with the exception of the one listed as the 11th, where have we gone? 11th of July, isn't it? Okay, so moved and seconded. Any other comments? Well, we'll put those then. All those in favour of those being adopted, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. And just acknowledge significant work that a group of people have done in the background to get these all to us today. And yeah, they are more abbreviated than what we've had in the past, but because recordings are available, people can still refer back to recordings for more detail if they wish to along the way. So yeah, it's certainly been helpful to get them all these ones up to date. Still a few more to come, I think, but we will keep working on those and get them done. With that, would someone like us to move into public excluded, please? Councillor Linwood, Councillor Ryan. Those in favour, please say aye. And against, that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone who may have joined us for this live stream, and for everyone who's participated in the meeting. We'll now adjourn while we go into PE. Thank you.